And I'm looking at kind of his profile and I thought, oh my God, this guy's doing amazing stuff. So we had a meeting and he is doing amazing stuff. And then I joined, and if you go to his profile, you can sign up for his, if you go to the featured section, it's click here to attend my free effective communication seminar, which I did, which was fantastic. And then we got a chance to talk, and the story is fantastic. It's just like this classic bumping around in the dark, kind of doing the wrong things, where I'm doing the wrong things and I will not get exponential growth because the business fitness wasn't there. So that's what I would identify as you were not going to succeed and get exponential growth doing what you were doing. It was not going to happen because you didn't have business fitness yet, and you didn't understand how it works, and what are the elements that you really have to do and that you have to be good at. So I think that's what we want to start, is kind of like, why don't you let's talk a little bit about that story of, where you started with this and what that journey was like and how you figured it out and actually got the success that you have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's so great to be in this group. I love the vulnerability. I love the shares. I love the energy here. So it's a true honor to speak to your group and to be here today, Larry. So thanks for having me. And yeah, I think it's great to start from the beginning. So I grew up in a city called Montreal. So for those who don't know, Montreal is a city where in Canada that you need to know how to speak French. So when I was 5 years old, my parents looked at me one day and they said, "Hey, Brenden, you need to learn how to speak French." So they sent me to French school. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with presentations and communication like most of us, I presented in a language I didn't even know. So when I was, in first grade, second grade, I would struggle presenting, sharing ideas, and by saying things like bonjour. And that was my life, I guess, origin story. And then when I went to university, Larry, I started doing these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age are playing, rugby or basketball or some other sport. I was doing presentations for fun, and that's how I learned how to speak. And then after that, but the goal was never to become an entrepreneur or YouTuber. That was never my intention. The goal is to work at McKinsey or IBM and be a consultant there. I wanted to work as a Fortune 500 executive, not as an entrepreneur. But what happened was I started to coach people who are younger than me on how to speak, because as these students were entering the programs, they didn't have a communication coach. And I wasn't really one either. I just started helping them on how to speak. And then when I started working at IBM as a tech consultant a few years ago, I had the idea for Master Talk, the YouTube channel specifically, because I realized everything I was sharing on communication wasn't available on the internet for free. So that's kind of the summary of all of this.
So if you think about that transition, I think it's so interesting today, because I think we're in a really a fundamental shift around what you just said, which is a lot of people are not wanting to follow that career path anymore. And that idea of working for McKinsey or Goldman or whatever, it's very seductive from a status standpoint, but it's not really personally satisfying. And I don't know, people here, Yinka Iwolo, I'm pretty good friends with, who comes to our group on Wednesday. She's very successful at Goldman, and she left and she started her own coaching business. Well, not so easy to do, and she did it and she was successful. So I'm wondering, you didn't go down that career path. How did you launch this? I guess you look at it as sort of, you talk about it as like a side hustle YouTube channel that turned into a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of it was by accident, if I'm being transparent. And one piece of that as well that I want to emphasize for the group is I still went on that career path. Like I worked at IBM for 2.5 to 3 years before I was able to replace all my income. But in that journey, I would say what I realized was I just did something that I was interested in. This is probably the first tip I would share with the group. I'm a big fan of side hustling comfortably. Like I hate the stigma of being on a couch eating beans every day and building a business. Wasn't me at all, actually. I had a 6-figure corporate job. I was doing really well financially, but I made the decision to invest 10 to 20% of my time outside of my corporate life to build Master Talk on the side. But at the beginning, just so we're super transparent here, I was just a guy in my basement making videos. I just realized a lot of my YouTube information wasn't available for free. I started watching other videos on YouTube that weren't really practical. You hear advice like, oh, be yourself, get up on stage, share your energy. I was like, this isn't helping anybody. So I
Mhm.
started posting videos because I thought about the 15-year-old girl who couldn't afford a communication coach, who was in high school, scared about presentations. So I just kept making a video every week. And then I would say 8 to 9 months into Master Talk, I was sending tens of thousands, literally cold emails to university professors just to share the videos. I still didn't have a business. I was just saying, hey, you should share this with the students. I used to be a student. You should help them. And they all spit in my face, which is another story that we could talk about, which is funny. And then I met my business partner later, and he's the one who really helped me turn this into a business.
I think there's an important piece in there around the personal fitness part for me, which is I think most really successful businesses that I've seen come from entrepreneurs who just are frustrated with something that's not being solved, and they start trying to solve it. This is my journey with Revenue Climber, of just being frustrated with this whole ecosystem of self-employment support that wasn't supporting me very well, and feeling like there should be a better way to do this. And I think you had the same experience with the public speaking coaching, and you saw that opportunity in that niche market. But then there's another phase of business fitness, which is how do you turn that into a product and effectively communicate it to a target market and connect with them in a way that fits into their worldview, and understanding their belief system and what they actually need, not just what you want to push on them. So you were pushing on them this idea and this passion, which a lot of people do, but it's not going to work. So I'm just curious about, that story of, you're all excited and you're pushing this stuff out into the world, and it's not going so well, at the beginning. What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely happy to talk about that. So at the beginning, Larry, to your point, the YouTube videos weren't really good. And I still have my old ones up so people can see how bad they were. I was just making videos every week. But the reason I kept going is, and this is another tip you can all write down, is the 5 people who just kept watching my stuff. I would say at the beginning of any phase of business or any idea, we're very fragile as human beings. Like, of course, now I'm at a point where, like, yeah, I could totally make Master Talk work. The business is doing really well, but it wasn't the case at the beginning. The beginning of the journey, it's like, oh, I'm too young. I can't do this. I don't have the money. I'm making all these excuses up. But there's 3 to 5 people who are constantly supporting you, right? Who are constantly there for you. And I feel that support group is really important. It doesn't even have to be 5 people. It could be 3 people who remind you that you have something special here. And that's what happened with me. I was probably 3 months into Master Talk and I just wanted to give up. I was like, this is stupid. I'm making like 6 figures at IBM. Who cares? I can just keep working here and grow. But there's this one girl who was talking to me and she said, hey, I really like your stuff. I've been watching every video. And I started laughing because I thought she was kidding. I was like, there's no way you're watching my videos. But then she started going through all of the tips. Hey, this is the tip I learned on eye contact. I was like, oh, she wasn't kidding. Like, she's actually watching. So that small group of people really gives you the confidence. And then the second part of the question later is, how does this later turn into a product or service? Is as you build up a raving fan base, and you don't need 1 million people. My whole business is built on 100 people, guys. Like, it's not built on 1 million people. It's built on 100 high-level people who pay me for coaching. That's it. So you find those people and you have dinner with them. And I mean that literally. Like, actually speak to them, ask them questions. If you were to explain my idea back to me, what would you say? What are your challenges? Really understand what they're going through at a level that anyone else doesn't. This is a quote you can write down as well. You want to understand your audience more than they understand themselves. Can I repeat that again? Understand your audience more than they understand themselves. And then once you're able to get to that place, you can test out different products and ideas. I'm happy to talk about how that worked out for me and when things started working, but that's the general principle.
It's extraordinarily important. And so in the business fitness steps, one of the business fitness steps that I'm working people through, there's a piece on how do you have a conversation. It's called a connection conversation. And that's exactly what you said. And the idea of the connection conversation is you become an expert. Your job is to become an expert in the desires, the belief systems, the actions, the habits, and the decisions around different experiences in your market. And the way you do that is you talk to people about it. So the connection conversation process is basically you're interviewing somebody for 20 minutes and you're basically going towards, you build that rapport first so they'll talk to you, and then you go right into what is your focus. So you get into what are they thinking about. That's where the belief systems are. That's where the, the interests are, the pain, all that stuff, the desires. And then you got to figure out where are they going? So why are you doing all this? Like, where do you want to go? You got to tell the story to yourself about your market. And then you find out, like, what's their aspiration? What do they care? What do they really care about? Not what you think they care about. What do they care about in their words? And you write down their words. And then the next phase is experiences. In other words, what are they actually spending money on to alleviate that problem is the bridge. So they need a bridge and they're spending money on these different bridges. I call it experiences. What are those? And if you start doing that, I'll give a challenge to everybody here. Take a screen share right here of everybody on this call. Reach out to 5 people that you think are a good fit for you, not as customers, just people you think, wow, that strikes me when you see, forget about the customer thing. It's not how it works. So you look at their LinkedIn, say, I really want to know that person, reach out to them, find out what they're focused on, find out where they're trying to go, and find out how they are doing. How are they trying to get there? What are their experiences and how much are they paying? And who are they paying? And what results are they getting? And if you do that long enough, you will be an expert in your market. You'll know more than they do about themselves. And I think that's what you're saying here.
Oh yeah, especially at the beginning, like, just so people know, like, what I've done, even if I'm pretty young, I'm 25 currently, I've coached over 400 people on how to communicate, right? So output's really important, everyone. And the first 100, I did it for free because it was mostly out of love. You don't have to wait until you've served 100 people. But what this does is it helps you stay in movement. Because I feel the problem, especially in the topic of side hustles, right, Larry, is a lot of people, they don't move. They kind of just stay, and then their salary keeps increasing at work, and they just go, oh, well, I guess I won't invest the time. Whereas me, I'm so product obsessed that even today I still spend 10% of my time coaching kids, which is not beneficial to me in any way monetarily, because it keeps me sharp as a facilitator. So I coach my clients as kids. I have like a little badge here. But I don't do that a lot. I just do that because I always want to get better as a facilitator. And then as I was getting better, I was able to charge later on for, and then build a product and service around that for the right demographic. But it doesn't start that way. It starts with, who do I love to serve? What type of product can I serve them on in some cost-effective way that I can test it? And then eventually when people are getting results, and more importantly, better results than competitor products, then you're onto something, then you can triple down on that.
It's great. I mean, I've spent a year basically building things, giving them away for free, and talking to people about what's going on with them. I spent a whole year doing that. Now I'm lucky enough to have another business, and I took a pay cut, a huge pay cut, to do this because I want to do this. And I'm not looking for short-term hits of just signing people up until we're really ready to do that, which is what's starting on April 15th, because you don't have the right product yet. So we've tested things that haven't worked that well. And when you do that, and I just found, every single one of those failures, again, is like, meet it with enthusiasm. You have to be happy about it, but you just kind of keep stumbling through. And then, the market so well, exactly what, it just happens. All of a sudden, exactly, this is what they need. And then you go that direction. I think you did the same experience, but if you look at business fitness, the other part of it is you have to observe what you don't have. So you have to live in reality. And I think your reality was you needed a partner on the business side. I'm curious, like, how that happened, because there are people here, like for me, I would not be able to do this without Dave Book, who's on the call here, and Glenn Torgiani. Glenn's running my other business better than I ever could. I'm not particularly good at running businesses and managing people. He is. I'm not good at managing clients. He is. Dave is good at building systems and making things concrete and structurally sound and solid. I am not. So it's like, it is a different, but that same thing you experienced happened with me as well. I would not be able to do this without those partnerships, which are not employee partnerships either. So there's lots of ways to structure this. So I'm curious about your experience with that, with your partner.
Yeah, for sure. Like, great question. So I would say everyone's got their own opinions on this, but here's mine. I only believe in partnerships if it works. You know, the divorce rate for partnerships is actually higher than the divorce rate for relationships. So you always have to be careful with who you partner with. But I'd say a framework that's hard, because I got really lucky with Vamsi, if I'm being straight. Like, I wasn't looking for him. He just found me. He was in mid 40s. He's been in the coaching industry for 10 years. He really spent a lot of time investing in me and like financially and everything. So that's why he's my business partner, because he's done so much for me. But I would say that the key framework you want to think about is, the first piece is, how can you be successful on your own if you don't have a business partner? Always plan for the worst case scenario. You know, Gary Tan, who's the founder of Initialized Capital, has a great quote on this. He says the best founders in the world are pessimistic short term and optimistic long term. So what that means is they're pessimistic about the day-to-day activities. Oh, craps, I have to fire somebody. I have to go get a customer. And they're doing the day-to-day, but they're optimistic about the long term. So they go, if I keep doing this craziness for 10 years, this is the big vision that will happen. So for me, a partnership wasn't actually a part of my plan. I just, I was just making YouTube videos. I knew in 5 years, if I just kept making videos, at some point I'd be able to replace my income, but I didn't have a clear direction. But what happened is, when I met Vamsi, and this is the framework I would say, is when you're vetting for business partners, this is the ratio I go with. And it's a bit morbid, but I think it helps, is if that person screwed you over, is the value of their partnership so much higher than they could take from you. So I'll give you an example. Like, when I met Vamsi, he had added so much value. He literally gave me hundreds of thousands of dollars of coaching, to a point where it's like, yeah, I completely trust the guy. And we've been married ever since, right? We have a great partnership, and I feel we'll be partners for life. But I'd say the key is, when you're vetting people, don't just ask yourself, what can I do for them? Because all of you are go-givers, because you're part of Larry's group. So it's obvious. I know all of you are pouring into other people, but I would flip that a little bit. What are other people doing for you? How much are people pouring into you? And the strategy I would use, it's very practical, that you can all implement. I call this the value list. I was telling Larry this the other day, but essentially what I do is, when I enter a new mastermind, new group, I actually rank the people that I meet in that group. So let's say I meet 50 people for coffee. I rank my top 10 favorites in order of, and this is very key, not in status, not in money, but how much they're actually pouring into me, how much they actually care about serving me. So that way I know, because I'm a go-giver too, I know who I should pour into intentionally. And the people at the top of the list, those are only the people I vet as business partners. Anything below top 3, I don't even consider. They're just people I would help, but I wouldn't do business with them that much, because there's just so many people in the world. And another analogy that I'd like to bring here that I think will be useful, because a lot of people, Larry, are scared about relationship building. Like, oh my God, like, how do I get everyone to like me? And I think that's the wrong framework. Like, think of this, everyone. Okay, mental exercise. Let's say you meet somebody new every few days, excuse me. Okay, one person every few days. In a year, give or take, you'll meet 100 people. Okay, does everyone follow that analogy so far? Thumbs up, Jane, Ryan, Chris, everything makes sense, Jen? Awesome, Chuck. Okay, cool. So let's say we live 50 more years. So let's say Larry's 30 years old right now, and he lives 50 more years, and he's 80. Every year, if he meets 100 people, he only gets to meet 5,000 people in his life. So whenever you think about relationship building, don't ask yourself, how do I get everyone to like me? But rather ask yourself, who do I want those 5,000 people to be? So when you think of it like that, you go, oh, I actually don't get to shake a lot of hands. So I might as well be very selective with who I spend my time with.
So when I started the Summit Club group about 6 months ago, I was very careful who I invited into the group. And we had about, I don't know, about 60 people sign up. And I felt like it was helpful. But then when I went through my own focusing exercise, I thought, why am I spending time on this? Is this really worth it? And I brought that up over probably a month and a half ago now. And I felt like I'm not really adding a lot of value here, and I'm not sure it's really helping my business. And the response of the people on the line is, are you fucking kidding me? and they're telling me, we're working together. I got 5 clients because of the, or and it's like on and on and on and on and on. I'm like, I had no idea any of that was happening. Once I figured that out, I doubled down. And then all of a sudden, all these people start coming up to me, let me help you get this business launched as you're working through moving into that phase of building your product, launching your product. So I had almost 15 calls with people from that whole Summit Club community, because I reached out to everybody. I was like, hey, can we talk for a few minutes? And got really an assessment of where their focus is and what they care about. So I could help that group more effectively. And I leaned into that. And the help that came back to me was absolutely overwhelming. And there's science around this. It's called reciprocity. So if you study, biology and persuasion and all these, which everyone here should be reading about, that reciprocity is one of the principles. I want to help you because you helped me. It is a biological imperative in the species, and I think that's a big part of what you're saying. So don't worry about who's a customer or not. Find people that you can connect with, I call it a lunchroom table sometimes, of people you want to eat lunch with every day. That has completely changed my life. I've never done business like this before. I've always focused on who is my customer first. So do we should probably get to some questions or comments. So if anybody wants to raise their hand or let's see, I haven't looked at the chat while we've been talking. I'm going to pull up the chat really quick and see if there's any questions here, but if anyone would like to raise their hand. Let's see.
I think Ryan had a question here early in the chat. He says, I have those 5 people right now. So he was referring to the 3 to 5 people who support you. And then he asked, did those 3 to 5 people or 100 people give direction to future videos, products, and services that you offer? So yeah, great question, Ryan.
Ryan, is that, you want to explain the question a little bit more? And we'll
let me add one. I'll put some context around that, add a little bit more to that. So I do have like specific things that are my unique, I guess, program or style that I go after. But oftentimes when I have a group of people that I'm in front of or a group of people I'm working with, it always makes me second guess, should I be doing this other stuff that they find valuable and go learn about it and offer that? I was just wondering for you and your route and your journey on this, did you stick to your guns on what you knew well and not chase those, as Larry said, shiny things to go over? I'll start teaching that and start doing that because that's what your audience, you felt like they needed, or did you stick to what you knew and you put walls up on those shiny things and kept them out?
Yeah, great question, Ryan. Love to get your perspective as well on this, Larry. I would say for me, I got lucky in life in some ways because I figured out what my expertise was very early. Like I started coaching on communication. I was probably 19, and I realized I was very good at it probably around 22, and I started coaching CEOs when I was 23. So when I realized that, kind of like how Tony Robbins in his like late 10s, early 20s realized that's what he wanted to do in life, then he put all of his focus on that and then derived. So I would say there's two lanes of thought here, Ryan. So the first one is, do we already have a passion that we love to do? I don't know if, I'm sure you've shared this before in past episodes, Larry, but Ikigai, right? It's like the 4 categories of life. Like, what am I good at versus what am I passionate about? So go through that framework. But the idea is, if you've already found that, then you're definitely doing a disservice to the world by not pursuing that. So let's say, take me as an example. When I looked at what I wanted to do in life, and it was evident that I was really good at communication and public speaking, I would do a disservice to the world if I started coaching 7 other different things, because I wouldn't be able to build up my expertise in a way that could really serve a lot more people, or find areas of thought and expertise that no one else is thinking about because I'm too scattered. Right. So always think of it from that lens. But the other piece that's also important is, if you haven't found that passion yet, because that's normal too, right? Because when I was younger than 19, 20, I didn't know what my passion was either. So for all of us, we find it at different stages of life. So what I did instead, it's kind of like a scatter. you try a bunch of different things, and then you feel where your energy drives you. There's a great quote by Robert Deerdeck on this. He said on a podcast with Lewis Howes. He said, never chase passion, chase energy. And never chase passion, chase energy. So what's getting you personally excited about it? So let's say I wrote a bunch of ideas, right, on a piece of paper. What do I want to do? Do I want to start like a coaching business? Do I want to do career coaching? But when I got to coaching, like you could see in my face, like I love to coach. Like I love it. Like you can see the energy. But that's not true with some people. It's a difficult business because you're always talking to people. It's a people business all the time. You always have to show up. So it's not for everyone. So if you don't know what you want to do yet, I would say try a bunch of different things and follow where your energy is taking you and follow that intuition. And eventually you'll find it. But it's also about having that frame. Last thing I'll say on customer segment, I have a different opinion than most people in the industry. They say things like find your niche. But now that I've been in business for 4 or 5 years, I can confidently say that it's not as easy as you think to find your niche. I think it's the opposite. I think it's more about you need to try different customer segments, because I tried so many customers. I tried serving students. They're great, but they don't pay any money. So I couldn't build a business around it. I tried early stage founders. I was so passionate about CEOs, but if they're too early stage, they can't afford a few $1,000s for speech coaching, even if they know it's beneficial to them. But then when I landed on tech executives, everything worked and all the dials aligned. And I focused primarily on tech execs or 6-figure entrepreneurs and coaches. But I didn't start there. I just started splattering until I found the key. So don't be shy to try different customer segments until you find the one that actually resonates and that you're getting the best results for as well.
I think it's a great question. And for me, I was coached on hyper niche strategies as well, based on industry, as well as functional capability. So what everyone was telling me is niche in lawyers or niche in spiritual coaches or whatever, and other people were saying niche in product, so focus on LinkedIn marketing or what else was I working on, sales conversion or whatever. I don't think any of that's wrong if that's where the energy is. So I agree with Brenden. My energy does not go there. It would have been a bad decision, and it also wouldn't have got me to my dream destination, because I'm more ambitious than that. So for me to make a fundamental change in the world and how people experience self-employment, which is where I am focused, I want to change it. I have to be a generalist with a systematic approach. In other words, analyzing all the pieces. So that's harder. How do you fill the gap of not being able to be expert in every one of those things? My way of filling the gap was with the Summit Club community. So I'll know enough about public speaking where I can help people, if that's part of business fitness, learn how to get a little bit better at public speaking. But there'll be a certain point where I'll be running challenges with, Brenden and Andrea Enright on LinkedIn. And, there's other people. I know all these people now that are experts in these niches, and then bringing them in, Chris Colt on, how to do a challenge and build a community. But I'm giving a baseline. So that's how I got specific. I think the key is where's your energy, and can you find a way to make it specific? And does it get you to your destination that you want personally? And does it fit your vision for what you want to create in the world? It's got to, that stuff's got to line up. And then you stay enthusiastic all the time. So we had another important question here, which is people talk about this YouTube. So on Twitter, I saw this great post on Twitter is I wonder how many of these top Twitter influencers are living in their parents' basement. So this kind of question, and I think there's a lot of them. So how did you turn the YouTube channel into a business? Is the question.
And it's funny because you mentioned that. I still live in my parents' basement, by the way, even if I do pretty well in my business. And the reason, by the way, is because I'm a big believer that time is more valuable than my money. Because I don't know when
you don't have to live in their basement.
I don't have to. Oh no, I really don't.
That's what I'm saying. The difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, time with my mother is probably the most important thing. So that's why I just live with her. But yeah, I would say for how I turned it into a business. Okay, so here's the way I think about it, because I feel not a lot of people talk about this. especially when it comes to social media strategy, everyone is always going for what's hot. Oh, LinkedIn organic is amazing. Oh, TikTok, you just got to start making TikToks all the time because Gary Vee is telling you to do that. But instead, what we need to start thinking about is, what do you want your personal brand to look like 10 years from now? This is a question no one thinks about. What does your personal brand look like in a decade? Because that's the way you want to do it. The most successful business owners are known for one thing. They do one thing really well for a decade plus, and then they become the category king or queen in that space. So when you reverse engineer that, you realize really quickly, going back to YouTube, that there's very few platforms in the world that if you invested 10 years of your life into, you'll actually get exponential results. So I just looked at it very objectively. Turns out there's really only 4 mediums. Writing a book, that's going to immortalize your ideas, but it's hard to sell because it's hard to sell the book if you don't have a platform. So that doesn't really work. That's why I don't have a book. Number 2 is a blog. So Seth Godin is a great example of this. He's been writing a blog every day since the internet started, I guess. In his case, he just started Seth.blog. And that's what he's known for. But because he owns that audience, it spiraled 30 years later. Now he charges what, 150, 200 grand a year? A speech, and he still doesn't do it, even if they offer him 200. And that's the power of the blog. Then we have the podcast. So the podcast is also a medium that you own, scales up over time. But the problem with the podcast is that in that specific scenario, it's hard for discovery. It's hard to get search. So it's not the best idea. But the other piece, which is the last thing I believe, is YouTube. Okay, think about this, everyone. If I asked you to name the number of famous people in podcasts, what would you say? You might say Jordan Harbinger, Lewis Howes, you might go Joe Rogan, and then you'll quickly run out of names. Blogs, you might go Seth, Tim Urban. So you do that with every social until you get to YouTube, but YouTube, you could go for days.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, oh yeah, I know like a bunch of famous people on YouTube. And that's the point. That's why I chose to invest in YouTube, because I know in 10 years, because now my YouTube channel is growing a lot faster than it used to, is it helps me sell better. This is another quote as well. Fame is the most efficient business model, right? Mm-hmm. Fame is the most efficient business model. This is something that one of my mentors and coaches, Sharon, talks a lot about in our mastermind. He says that fame is the most efficient business model. Last piece I'll say on this, I'll throw it back to you, Larry. I don't actually make a lot of money off YouTube. For me, YouTube is really a mission. It's very difficult to have a dedicated YouTube channel, and I do not recommend it to most business owners. It's literally a full-time job. I have a media team now that takes care of all this. I'm coaching them on how to produce the videos. It's a lot of work. I do it for the people who can't afford me. That's my mission. I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford me. That's why I take my YouTube channel very seriously, because I want to make sure that after I'm dead, people can learn from me forever. That's my mission. But from a business perspective, the reason YouTube is so effective is because it's a good closer. Okay, so I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Let's say somebody finds me on LinkedIn. Okay, they want to hire a communication coach, and they're considering me and 3 other people. They'll always pick me most of the time. And I'll tell you why. Because all the other 3 coaches are going, okay, here's my pricing. Let's get on a strategy call. I don't do that. I just respond with, what's your biggest challenge? And they go, I suck at meetings, but I have a video on that. And I share all my information for free. So I just send them the video and they go, I want to work with Brenden because he's got the credibility. So I close clients like butter because of my YouTube channel. But you don't need, here's my 80-20. Sorry, last piece on this. You don't need a dedicated YouTube following. You just need 5 to 10 videos. So what I would encourage you to, not even 10, I would actually say 3. And the basis of those 3 videos is simply this. What is a question that my prospect is asking me? And how do I build a really nice video around that question? So let's say somebody goes, Brenden, I'm scared of communication. How to overcome your fear in public speaking. So make 3 of those, send those to prospects, and you'll be able to build relationships and trust with them really quickly. You don't need a dedicated YouTube channel.
It's such an interesting commentary. And I think there's phases through this, and I'll talk about my own experience with it. There's 5 ways to connect with people and fill up your calendar. You have to be able to fill up your calendar on demand with people who are the right people. That's a skill. There's 5 ways to do that. I call one direct outreach without spam and social media. The social media party, joining the social media party, virtual rooms, which include Zoom rooms and digital rooms, And then threaded connections, in other words, working through other people's connections and other people's networks. And then there's getting on stage, whether it's your own stage or other people's stages. But those are connecting oriented activities. There's attraction activities like the YouTube channel and organic inbound through LinkedIn or TikTok or Twitter or whatever these things are. I think people are doing it backwards a lot of the time. So what they're doing, and I don't think it works, is they're trying to go to inbound before they've mastered connection. So the calendar's not filling up because people aren't coming in because you don't know your market. You don't even know what to talk about. So there's sporadic posting. And I look at the list, read people's posts, and I'm like, those posts, I'm sorry, they're awful. And I look at my old posts from a year ago, and even some of the new ones now still, and I'm like, these are just awful. But I'm great on the phone. So connecting with people and having these conversations is an important step you can't miss. Then work with attraction. There will be a moment where I will stop using LinkedIn organic. It's too much work. We are starting our YouTube. We have a YouTube channel for a while, but it's going to be really good over the next 6 months. And we are paying someone that we started with last week to help us figure out the YouTube channel. And the reason is YouTube lasts forever. You put up something on YouTube, a year later, they still come back. It's not disposable content like these other places. So what I'd like to do is break the group down into small rooms. If you want to stay on for another half an hour, feel free. If you have to leave in 5 minutes, that's fine, obviously. But we ran a little long on this, but I wanted to keep it going because I think it's been really great. And in the subrooms, my offer to people is do it however you want, but switch off, ask the other person kind of what are you focused on, where you're trying to go, and have a conversation that way within that structure and listen to the other person and then switch. So we'll break that up right now. But awesome, Brenden, thank you so much. I know this was is challenging because you've got a conference you're at, and I really appreciate you doing it. It was incredibly insightful. We're putting this up on our YouTube channel. So if we could put the link into the channel in the feed here, I'd appreciate that. So we'll have somebody put that in, and then we'll have that up there in another day or so. All right. Well, thanks everybody.